Hello everyone, Nikki Fletcher here, and today Andrew and I are talking to Sophie Solaria and Johnny Baker, all about their IVF journey, their decision-making processes and things like that, because they are in a very different part of their journey or stage of their journey than Andrew and I are. And I thought it would be really helpful if we all had a discussion, particularly as you may have come across Sophie and Johnny during some radio broadcasts they were doing for BBC Radio 4's PM programme. So hi Johnny, hi Sophie, how are you?
Hello.
And if we're laughing, it's because I was really having trouble with pronouncing Sophie's surname.
Everyone has trouble pronouncing my name. So
yeah, I have it with my first name. People don't know how to pronounce it, because of the way I spell it. Anyway, it's lovely to talk to you today. So, could between the two of you, could you just explain a little tiny bit about who you are and sort of where you are in this sort of childless, not by choice journey that you're going through?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Sophie, obviously, that's Johnny. Don't get us confused. But we both work for the BBC. Johnny's behind the sort of screen and I work as a reporter. And in our personal life, we've been trying for children since we got married. So 5 years ago now, we got married and started trying. And sadly, it hasn't worked for us yet. And it hasn't worked at all ever. No. It has been really unsuccessful. We were told that it would be very difficult for us to have children because I have severe endometriosis and extremely low ovarian reserve. Currently going through the hot flushes of the menopause, unfortunately, at 35. So it's really young and a real shock. It was a real shock for us. We've gone through an incredibly difficult emotional time, as anyone that has experienced infertility does and will. And we decided to basically put all that trauma to good use. And the way that we wanted to do that was to document our journey on our final round of IVF, because after 35 we decided no more. We couldn't do it to ourselves anymore. We couldn't do it to our bank balance anymore. And so we decided that we were going to do one last round, record that as a video diary for Radio 4's PM programme, and then continue on by looking at other people's journey who have come out the other end, really, because for us, we were really struggling to see what that end point for us would be if we couldn't have our own children. What on earth would we do next? And of course, there are a whole wealth of decisions and choices. You could decide not to have children, or adopt, or foster, or use a donation, egg sperm donation. And so there are so many options, but we just didn't know anything about them because we'd spent our whole lives hoping for our own baby and for the IVF miracle to work. So I pitched an idea to a couple of places in the BBC, but the PM programme took it up and said, we'd really like to explore this with you. And so that's really where the series began. And it it seems to have done really well. I
think after having 5 rounds of failed IVF, I think we both needed a bit of a new direction. And by trying the 6th and recording it, it almost took our minds off it a bit. And I mean, both of us doing what we do, we sort of went into work mode, and it allowed us then to sort of not just process that last failed round, but with the series, look into the other options and really explore them, rather than just do a bit of internet searching and go, well, what is adoption, what's egg donation, what do all these elements take, but to actually go and speak to people who have done it, who work within the processes, and tell other people, and I suppose help ourselves by telling other people what actually goes on.
Basically live the journey with other people, and they can sort of live it through us, really.
Yeah, and certainly Andrew and I have both felt that we are further along in our emotional healing since we started the magazine, since we started organising the summit as well. Speaking for you,
Yes.
Because Andrew doesn't have feelings.
I mean, for you, when we met you for the series, it was quite a emotional time for us as well, because you brought in a different element for us that we hadn't considered, and that wasn't just the idea that you guys had to let go of your dream of having children, but you were also facing the possibility that people around you would be becoming grandparents. We never considered that, had we?
No,
until we met you.
We spoke about that quite a bit after speaking to you, and how that would then feel a second time around, because we're still struggling to find out that friends are getting pregnant, because we haven't got past that stage yet. And like you, if you never do, then you have to relive that again. And I think it sort of helped, I say, speaking to you and speaking to others has almost helped inform our decisions in certain ways.
How are you feeling now, guys? Are you definitely over that side and out the other?
You go first.
Personally, yes, to a point. Recently, about a week ago now, not state, 6 days ago. 6 days ago would have been my son's 29th. Oh, sorry, was the 22nd anniversary of his death, and so that would make him 29 now. And thinking about that, technically I could be a grandfather.
Yes.
Physically by now, and indeed my parents were at my age.
Yeah.
Just about. So it does bring it into sharp relief. I mean, I don't normally dwell on my son's life and death, because it's easier, and it was a long time ago. Easier not to, and it was a long time ago. But that just sort of brought things into relief, because of what we're doing with the magazine and the summit. Was that, actually, I could have been a grandfather by now. Scary thought, because I don't feel as though I'm old enough to be a grandfather, but technically or physically I could have been.
And I've certainly noticed actually that over the past few days that Andrew's been talking about Angus a bit more than he has in recent years. And I think that's partly because of that. It's a case of, wow, it's not just other people's grandparents' announcements that we could be dealing with now, but it could be Angus phoning us to say, oh, by the way, Dad. And I think that was a bit of a shock. I think so, generally speaking, though, it's gone a bit better. I'm probably not going to know exactly how much better it is until the next announcement. I don't think you really know.
No.
And to be honest, I think that trigger days is what I've learned that they're called. Happen out of the blue. Like I don't honestly feel like sometimes you can feel fine, and then other times something small can trigger it. You just don't know when it's going to come, and that's the unfairness, I think, of infertility and childlessness, because you think you're coping and then you're just not one day. And it's just a really unfair process when you feel like you've turned the corner.
The way I describe it is that it's a bit like living in a game of snakes and ladders, where the trigger days send you tumbling down a snake. But it's not a normal game of snakes and ladders. It's been taken over by the magic Hogwarts in Harry Potter. So the triggers, and also the things which actually sort of give you a little push forward and sort of make you feel better, all of those things can randomly move, like the staircase at Hogwarts School. So you're going along, and you know that sort of, the last time that it was coming up towards, let's say, Mother's Day or Father's Day, I really struggled. And you're sort of preparing yourself for the fact that you're going to struggle this time again. And you don't notice, actually, that there's a trigger which wasn't there last year. which suddenly appears, and you're so busy looking sort of a week ahead that you don't know the trigger, you don't notice the trigger just in front of you.
And actually, yeah, you are right.
It sneaks up on you.
It sneaks up because I think, Christmas, I remember feeling really like I have to really watch Christmas because last Christmas was really tough. So this Christmas, I have to really be careful. And actually, we negotiated Christmas very well. And then it was after Christmas that I fell. And it's just so typical, isn't it?
And as you say, news can creep up on you. You might feel quite in a comfortable place, and then bang, someone hits you with some news, or you find something out that you really weren't expecting. I think when you don't expect it is the hardest thing.
Yeah.
I found myself, the longer our journey is, and the closer perhaps we are getting to it, like it's nearly possibly in reach, if we make the next decision, I find myself getting less tolerable. And I don't know whether that's, you talk about these trigger days, I don't know whether it's I notice them more and I understand what they are. Perhaps in the past I didn't and was just in a mood or in a way that, I couldn't explain. But I think I find myself just less tolerable, and I'll be at work sometimes and I'm in a really bad mood, really like something's really got me, and I'm really not very, a bit angry and a bit upset, and I just, want to get to the next day. But I think I feel that a bit more now than I ever have.
Sometimes it can be worse than others.
Well, I still think it's a bit like if you imagine that you're decorating a room. Your room is looking, okay, the paintwork is looking a bit tired, the wallpaper is looking out of date or whatever it is, but generally speaking, everything's neat and tidy, it just needs freshening up. And then you start work on it, and the room suddenly becomes much, much worse. And you have to go through the actual process of redecorating before the room starts looking good again and looks better than it was. And I think when you start becoming aware of how you're feeling, there is a tendency perhaps of feeling a bit overwhelmed by everything, because before you weren't noticing it and suddenly it's there.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. I do think you're right. And considering we did this whole house up from scratch, I think we also recognise what you're saying as well.
So I used a good example then. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry in a way, but glad in a way that when we talked to you for the PM programme, that's brought up something you weren't aware of. However, at least you're aware of it now, and I think being prepared is a good thing, because it just hadn't dawned on me or us at all. Really.
Well, I think this is it, and we obviously hope that because we're aiming for something. We don't know which direction yet, but we have extensively looked into other ways of becoming parents, but you just you can look into them like you guys did and then find yourself unsuccessful again. There's nothing is guaranteed, isn't it?
With this you can't put all your eggs in one basket. You might think you can, and this is our next step, this is great, this is going to work, and you might get there, it might not, and your dreams again can be dashed. I think when we were doing the PM series, every step we went through seemed like, this is a good idea, this is a good option, and then the next week would come around and then that would be a good option, and then that but then there's always cons with all those options as well, so much discussing. We're continually discussing what we could possibly do and what's best, and sometimes it's hard to find the best thing because perhaps not one of them necessarily stands out.
Is this actually a fault of modern living, is that we have too much information about what is possible? Whether it's practical is something else, but there are almost too many possibilities nowadays in not just in the childbearing, rearing, getting, whatever you feel like calling it, world, but in just about everything that you care to do. You could spend all your life looking at what's the best possible option and never make a decision, because something new will come along in the meantime.
Well, also there's what I find particularly difficult is the march of science, because and I feel a little bit like what people must have felt like before IVF and they couldn't have children, because every day, every week, every month there's a new scientific study that says this will help the future.
Yeah.
And I'm just so angry that it's not here now.
Yes.
You know, they're thinking about growing eggs outside the body. That's exactly what I need. They're talking about 3-person DNA, but for people that have got genetic problems, not for people like us. And you know, you just think all of this is round the corner technically, but not close enough for us to benefit. Very frustrating.
And we certainly felt that about endometriosis, because like you, Sophie, I've got endo as well, very severe, and I actually had no symptoms at all until my 40th birthday, even though I was high risk, because my older sister, my mother and my maternal grandmother all had endo. It wasn't discussed in our family at all. You know, it was women's problems, but which was the headline, if you like, but no substantial detail. And if I'd known about it, then I could have made some other decisions. But there is that sense of frustration that very little research has been done. More research and better practices is coming online, but it's the stuff which will help people in 20 or 30 years time, which is absolutely brilliant for them. But you know, what about me? What about you? You know,
what do we have to help us? I think one thing that drove our series was giving people some knowledge, giving people maybe something that might give them a head start to know what, if they do want children, or if they're struggling, what they can look at. And I think having been through what we've been through, and wishing perhaps someone had a guiding light, a shining light that we could follow and get some more information, I think that's one of the things that really drove it for us to do it.
Yeah, and you know, I've become really passionate about talking to younger women that have even the slightest concern, actually. Naturally, people come to me anyway now, because they're, you know, concerned about, if anyone's concerned about anything, I find that there's... Can I have a quick word, actually? Do you mind if I have a quick word about my symptoms, or my daughter's symptoms? But just in general, I think that we, as a country, are so reactive and not at all preventative. And, you know, in so many other parts of the world, particularly Europe, they're teaching younger women about their fertile health. You know, of course, it is very easy. Of course, it's easier to get pregnant when you're younger. It's definitely the message we're rammed down our throat. Don't look at a man and you may get pregnant. But also in other places, they're saying, but also, you know, you can get pregnant, but you also have to watch. If you have really heavy periods, you have to talk about that to somebody. If you've got pain in your abdomen, it might not just be wind or, you know, or stress, you know, these kind of conversations over in Europe, you know, the hospitals over there have donors waiting for people to come like us to go and get eggs. Now, over in this country, it's of course not anonymous anymore and donate. So that's the reason why they have more people. But the other reason is because, you know, their donors are so much younger, you know, and the reason they're younger is because they're more aware of this. So they're freezing their eggs and they're donating their eggs and they talk about it.
Their education is perhaps earlier and better, more informed, and so they know about it, and it perhaps removes the stigma.
I wish to God,
in this country.
I wish so much. I wish that when I was having the problems I had in my 20s, that someone had just done an AMH test and just told me what my FSH levels and AMH levels were, and told me that, you know, your eggs are really low and you are heading into the menopause.
So having that knowledge is really important, and as we say about perhaps in Europe, they look at you know, your fertility health. And they say, well, it's not about now, it's about 10 years' time. It's a bit like people being told now in their early 20s, start a pension. You know, it's not about now, but it's when you retire.
And we don't want to scare.
But it's, we don't want to scare them.
Factual, isn't it? Like, if you'd known what you knew when you were young, you would have made some different decisions.
Most certainly. I mean, in my mid-20s, I could have afforded to have my eggs frozen. But I didn't know that it was going to be important for me at all. Yeah.
And all right, I know the success rates of freezing have definitely improved, but weren't great. But I mean, just to be given a chance, just a chance would have been good. To just know, I think knowledge is power, I think, and I don't like to scare, I just think it's important. And so anytime anyone comes to me with any kind of symptoms of that sound like they are fertility related, I will always say push for this, and just pay to go and have your FSH and AMH levels tested. I mean, it's what is it? It's like 50 to 100 quid or something.
Yeah, it's worth it for the long run.
Most definitely. And also, there's the I think it's the CA 124 or 125 blood test. Yeah. Which is a cancer marker blood test, which is very scary when anybody mentions blood, cancer markers. But that was the first indication I had endometriosis, is the fact that my levels were elevated, but not so high to be in the range of cancer.
And what is the range?
I actually don't know what it is. Right. I should have looked that out. But what I will do is I will see if I can find that and make sure that is on the website. So we'll include that.
And I haven't even had that. I don't think I've even had that test. But I know people that have got higher markers. And if you're younger, it's less likely to mean cancer. Yeah. It is more likely to indicate this kind of stuff. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And
again, it's the cost of a blood test. And it would have, if that had been done in my mid-20s, again, I could have made other decisions and things. And going back to your comments about education, there is hope on the horizon. Because we've been recently talking to a lovely lady called Jessica Hepburn.
Oh yeah, I know her.
You know her, yeah.
I'm working with her actually for the Fertility Fest. I'm working with her on the Fertility Fest in June.
June?
May.
Or May.
May.
I hope it's May, because Andrew and I are flying over for it.
Yes.
But she also does stuff about there's something called the Fertility Show, which I think is later in the year. But yeah, Jessica's starting to do a pilot program about education and going into schools and things. And when we were talking a couple of weeks ago for the magazine, doing an interview, it was the case of the sort of education that you tend to get in the UK at the moment, and it's been like this for years. You've got the mechanics of sex education. So this is how you get pregnant. This is what pregnancy is, and all of the mechanical types of things. And then the rest of the sort of sex education is focusing on preventing pregnancy and preventing sort of sexually transmitted diseases and things like that, but nothing about sort of preserving your fertility, and also just being, as you say, more aware of things. Because one of the stats that Jessica mentions is that if you want to have a 90% chance of having 3 children, you need to start trying to conceive when you're 23 years old. And if you want a 90% chance of having 2 children, you can only delay that by 2 years. So you should be starting for your first child at 25. And it's kids. A lot of people nowadays, they want to have got the secure job, they want to have bought their home, and children just aren't on the radar, even though they want them. No. They're just not on the radar until you turn 30. Yeah.
That is scary, isn't it? Because you don't want the message to be backwards.
No.
In the sense that, women have, thank goodness, women have come so far since the times where we weren't allowed to work after children, or it wasn't thought right. Now we've got great careers, we're earning and doing better than some of our partners. Not us though. Not us though. Definitely not. But that should be celebrated. And yet now we've gone the opposite way, because of course biology hasn't caught up with us.
Yeah, exactly. Sort of younger girls and young adults are thinking, well, I want children in the future. Goodness me, I've been given this horror story. I need to have them now, and they're having them earlier. You don't want to, as you say, push the reverse.
It's very, very fine line.
Yeah, but that's just about clever education, as you say, in terms of the right information. And if there's not enough of it, they can often get the wrong information.
I just refer back to Europe again, because I just don't see that they're a nation of people that have sort of been honest with their young women, and I don't think there's an increased risk, not risk, but an increased amount of teenage pregnancies or anything over there. I think if anything, they're thinking, right, well, we'll do the best for ourselves, and as I say, freeze eggs or, you know, that kind of measure. But I haven't looked into it deeply enough. I just know that that's what I've heard.
Certainly in France, there are some very big tax and welfare packages that go with having children. And that's why they have relatively large families. You will see 3 children families is almost a norm, and then bigger, to the point that if you go into a supermarket and you go and buy your profiteroles or whatever, that sort of thing, they come in packs of 5. They don't come in 6s, they don't come in 4s, they come in packs of 5, because that's the standard family size.
Yeah. Mother, father, and 3 children.
Yeah.
It's often
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's I'm interested.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. What do they do right? Start earlier, I guess.
As I say, they have very big
tax incentives
and childcare and you name it, they have it, incentives. For instance, travel on public transport, if you have a family of 3 children, you get 30% off straight away.
Really?
Yeah. That's
So
a standard.
encouraging it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
They are.
Yeah. You see, they wouldn't do that here. I don't think we've got enough room for 3 children
No.
per family, have
No.
we?
No.
That's part of the problem.
And there's also the flip side of it. You know, one of the struggles sometimes when you're childless not by choice is that you feel that you're living in a very child-centric world. And governments are very concerned about the falling birth rate. So they are doing, making laws, etc., which makes having children more attractive financially and things like that. And so on one hand, we're saying that there needs to be more education and more encouragement to educate people so they can make informed decisions. But on the other hand, we're already struggling because we feel that we are marginalised as people who haven't been able to have children. And yet some of the things we're asking for is stuff which would actually sort of encourage even more people to have children. So it's a difficult situation sometimes to be in.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to balance that, because I think that any minority group will always feel very hypersensitive to things around them, and and rightly so. I mean, I do agree. I think that this world is very geared up to children. I think they're everywhere. I've written you an article to say that you can hardly leave the house without being, reminded you don't have a child.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I think a lot of my psyche is sort of in line to, we were on holiday recently and we were having an absolutely wonderful time. We didn't see a cloud for the whole week. We experienced extreme sunshine. We had nothing else to do except read our book and decide where we were going to eat. Literally, this was the worst point of our conversation. Where are we going to eat tonight, though?
Yes.
And yet, I wasn't 100% happy.
Yeah.
And I think the reason was because to my left there would be a woman teaching their little boy to swim, and to my right there'd be a woman that's building a sandcastle with their child. And that's not even being child-centric. That's just life, isn't it?
Yes.
If I'm so hypersensitive to anything like that, I'm looking for it.
Yeah, you really notice it at every turn, because that's what you want it.
So, I don't know how you felt, but there were periods of time when I felt that everyone on the planet, including the men, were all pregnant. It just seemed to be everywhere I turned, there would be a pregnant.
Everyone's pregnant. Yeah, everyone is pregnant.
And actually, again, it might just be our hypersensitivity, but it feels like we've had that through our hardest time. The last sort of year, 2 years, and perhaps the next year will be the time where everyone having it. Maybe it's because our friends, our peers,
I think it's that age
as well. and it just adds the, you know,
it's like wedding season, you know.
Yes.
I remember a friend that couldn't find a partner, and she'd just constantly be a bridesmaid, or she'd be at a wedding.
7 weddings in a year or something.
But there's something to be said about that, you know, because while I obviously feel painfully sad about the fact we don't have children, I used to look at people with kids and think, you've got it all, how has this happened? But I don't now, because I sort of look at the people that have children and I think, you've got your own problems.
Yes.
You know, there are people out there that have got one lovely kids, but they don't have the partnership that we have. I know people that have been through the IVF road to find that they've lost their partners, because not through death, through just strain. You know, and then there are people out there that seem like they've got it all, and then there's some horrible illness kick them. You know, life is crap. Really.
Yeah.
And it's just, this is our crap.
Yeah, and I think when you remove, I mean, especially for us, when we remove the fertility crap, the rest is amazing. And actually, that is the only real thing that we struggle with day in, day out, you know. And as you say, when we look at people, oh yeah, but we've got this, you know, we've got that, and you sometimes have to see what you do have, rather, you know, as much as what you don't, because otherwise you really get bogged down. In that.
Yeah, my most depressing times was when I was focusing on what other people had and not what we had.
Yeah,
you know.
And there's sometimes it can be the simplest little thing that can help you change that. You know, doing a little gratitude or mindfulness exercise. You know, one of they're always doing, people are always doing little mindful or gratitude challenges on Facebook, which don't cost anything, and it might just be a week. I did one recently which was using the colours of the rainbow, and literally every day you would go out, and whilst you were out and about, you would take a photograph of something which had that particular day's colour. And up until that point, I just wasn't noticing how much colour there was in my life. And then suddenly, you know, I was asked to be focusing on green or yellow, and just everything I saw was yellow, and it just opens your eyes to something different and your mind to something different.
That's a really nice idea.
Yeah, yeah. Take your mind off the things that you shouldn't and don't really be talking about.
Yeah. Really.
So actually, we've got a singing dog at the moment. Hopefully, he won't do too much.
You're lucky our cat's not got involved. I'm surprised Olive isn't here.
But yeah, it can be so difficult, and it's. I think it's all about trying to find the gifts, even within your pain. You know, I wrote an article just a couple of days about that, and it is trying to find something which is of value, and that might be, I know for a lot of people, and it was certainly for me until we started the magazine, one of the gifts I had was the fact that I had the time and, if you like, the mind space to be able to write. And I love writing. I've got about 50 ideas in my writing bucket list. Now that we're doing the magazine, there's less time to write, so I'm not quite sure if I'll ever get right the way through them. But yeah, I can fully see that if we've got 1 or 2 children, I just wouldn't have the time or the inner sort of space and the mindful space to be able to do my writing.
Absolutely.
So, I latch onto that now.
Yeah, no, very important.
Do you think the magazine has, I mean, it's giving you a new focus, but it's a focus on essentially being childless. Have you had to find something that removes you from that in a way? Thinking about it.
Interesting question.
Or does it make you think about it regularly?
Or is it easier because you think about it so often it's a bit more natural?
Yes, in many ways, because we are dealing with it, in inverted commas, 24 hours a day, but everybody, in inverted commas, everybody else is, because we get so many people talking about their CNBC situation. Yeah, I mean, the magazine throws up lots of different people. In the last issue, we had a guy who I'd served in the army with 30 odd years ago. We lived in a mess in Catterick together. He was a dentist, and so he's had his hands in my throat. But his experience, although he now has children adopted, his experience is quite extreme, in that his first wife committed suicide by hanging herself because she was childless. So you have that sort of extreme, at which point it brings into relief that actually, however you look at it, it's
what we've been through is nothing in comparison.
So in that respect, because you see a lot of people's stories, it does lessen.
Does it make you feel less alone?
Not necessarily. Well, yes, because we now know. Well, we know there's thousands, millions of people out there with who are suffering being childless, not by choice, as opposed to child-free. But our situation is actually not that bad, really, in comparison to some.
You've got each other.
Oh yes,
we have each other for a start.
Because we're only recently married.
Yes, yes.
We've only got our 13th anniversary coming up.
13th wedding anniversary coming up at the end of the month. So we're still newlyweds.
Yeah.
That's good. But the other thing is, I mean, when we were talking about your series for the radio, you said that in fact it made your last cycle slightly different because you were putting on your work hat whilst doing it.
That's right. That's
yeah,
right.
And it's similar to that.
Yeah.
You know, the magazine is our business now. You know, it's a full-time job.
Yeah.
You know, so when we get up in the morning, it's a case of okay, we're working. So I think that does make a difference.
Yeah.
And the other thing, we're not producing all the content either. Mm-hmm. It's not like writing a book where it's all my content or it's all our content shared. We're getting people who are writing stuff for us, and we're also now getting people who are approaching us as well, saying, we've come across your magazine. We'd like to talk to you about how we can contribute. So although it's early days, there are exciting signs that it's going to take off.
Good.
Which is brilliant.
Yeah, it's a great project. So good. Really good.
Thank you. And I think and this I think probably is something that you might want to consider is. One of the things that I certainly really struggled with when I realised that we couldn't have children is that sense of leaving a legacy. Because when you have children, it's an automatic thing because you are leaving a legacy through your children. And I'm not talking about you're leaving somebody money or a family heirloom or anything like that. It's the bigger word of legacy.
Yeah. And
when you have children, that's an automatic tick in the box because they are your children. You're passing on your DNA, etc. And obviously that wasn't going to happen for us. And I really struggled with the idea of leaving a legacy because I've got 3 older siblings. For whatever reason, none of them have had children. My sister's got endo, so she couldn't have them, and my brothers, for one reason or another, decided that it wasn't going to happen for them. It wasn't possible. My parents were both only children as well, so there are no aunts and uncles who have then had children who are sort of my cousins. So we really were sort of the end of the family line. And I'm incredibly interested in family history and the story sides of family history. I like the facts and figures as well, but it's the stories. And we've got a very rich family history in terms of stories. My maternal grandfather was an industrial spy after the Second World War. he converted one of the first working barges into a pleasure craft in the 1950s. And he, my mother and my grandmother went to the Queen's coronation. They sailed snail down the canals to London for the Queen's coronation. And we've got lots of newspaper reports following their journey. And that's just one person. And various other people have got, one of my ancestors won the Croix de Guerre and the Légion d'Honneur during the First World War. So we've got a very rich family story. And I was absolutely devastated that I wasn't going to be able to leave that story to anybody.
Yeah, I get that.
So one of the wonderful things about the magazine is that this is our legacy in big capital letters. We hope that it's a success in that it helps people all around the world, and we hope that when we get to the stage of not being able to run it anymore, that there will be somebody who takes over from it. So
you're passing on that legacy, which is that.
Yeah,
I get that completely, because I'm an only child, as I think we mentioned in the last time we spoke, and I've got quite a diverse family culturally. I haven't looked into our history, but I do think my granddad built the Titanic, helped build the Titanic. I know that.
He was a shipbuilder,
so I don't know a huge amount, but I do know that. And I feel exactly the same. But that was the biggest part, the hardest part for me, actually, was the idea that I wouldn't pass anything on, or there wasn't going to be a legacy.
And just have those stories to tell someone who has an interest in them. As you say, it's the personal stories of the people, your mothers, fathers, grandfathers, grandmothers, and what they have done in a different time. That's fascinating, and we find it fascinating. We would always hope that we could pass that on to our children, about the stories, not, as you know, not things or possessions, but actual stories of they can tell people and things like that. It's an interest, isn't it? And that's quite it's quite difficult, especially when you see other people being able to do that. I think as that comparison, that's one of the hardest things, isn't it? If we all just lived our lives, just the two of us, and not looked outside, it would be a lot easier when you start to compare.
I also find another thing that's extremely difficult, that as an only child, it means that I've not brought my parents' grandchildren.
Yes.
And so they're grandchildless, but not by choice.
Yeah.
I find that a real struggle.
Yeah.
I mean, they're also not young themselves. But Johnny's quite lucky in that his parents are in their early 60s, whereas my parents are heading into their 70s, and Dad's moving even further into that. And my mum said the other day, it would just be nice if your dad could hold your grandchild. Look, she wasn't applying pressure, we were just having a conversation about this. And that I find really hard.
But you will feel that pressure, whether anyone's exerting it or not. You yourself will feel that pressure and the disappointment that you're giving them, and all of that, really. You will. Yeah. That's difficult. So that's something else to deal with.
Yes, it's very, very, very difficult. I mean, Andrew's parents, we've got a nephew, so they do have a grandchild.
Johnny's mum and dad have got a grandchild. On Johnny's brother's got about a baby, so they've kind of. I think it's still hard for them. Very hard, because they had seen us suffer. And I think in a lot of ways, Johnny's parents probably reserve an element of joy that they've got this one grandchild now, because of course it just reminds them. Probably, I mean, I don't know. They've not said it, but might remind them of the fact we don't. But they do have him.
Yes,
and it has ticked that legacy
and
box.
And it has
grandchild box.
Or just the fact that they now just have a grandchild. Like Pam can now look after a little person, and that is their life, and that's not what my mum and dad have yet. It's just really, really hard for them and for me, but it's life.
It is. And I think one of the hardest things is not to add that guilt onto the other guilt that we're feeling.
That's true.
Because we are very good at piling on the guilt, aren't we? Even when there is no real reason for it. I mean, this is going to sound really strange, but I was actually lucky in the fact that I haven't had to deal with that, because both of my parents and my stepfather had died years ago, so I didn't have that sort of sadness to add into the mix. But I talk to other people, and I think, unfortunately, you are feeling guilty about something which is not something you should be feeling guilty about. Well, we shouldn't be feeling guilty about any of it, should we? Because it's not something we chose. But these emotions are an absolute nightmare for creeping up when they're not supposed to. Jumping us.
I think when we're doing the series, having seen the parents and sometimes the grandparents of the children, whether the children have been adopted or through donor conception or foster adoption, however that's been, that's always helped me, because there's no difference there.
No.
The parents love their child, the grandparents love the child, their grandchild, and I think it helped me look at the other options to say, well, actually, how that happens doesn't matter in the grand scheme of a family and how the child is loved. So
no, that
helped. But I did find that while we were going through it, and when you decide what you might do, you really scrutinise yourself. Yes. I found we really sit and scrutinise ourselves more than anyone else would. Not just maybe our financial situation, but our stability, our mental health, how we will deal with the next stages, not just for us, but how we would then portray them to the child. And I think that scrutiny really can bring you down. I think you overthink it sometimes, because nobody else really goes through that unless you're going through this situation. Yeah, you portrayed that in the series, because you ask the questions that everyone is thinking, but sometimes we're afraid to ask because they don't want to seem that their thoughts or their mental health is somewhat compromised. And I think it's important to get that out. I don't think there's enough of that to say, look, this is really difficult. This is what we think about, and this is what we have to deal with in our heads. You don't just there's the decisions, pick up the phone, choose one.
There's still loads of stigma. It doesn't matter how much we do to try and break it. Even when I talk about just allude to the idea that we haven't got kids yet, I just feel, maybe I'm being oversensitive, but I just feel like the room kind of just goes. Even now, after everything we've done, and it's so public.
And people have unasked questions. Everyone would have a question to ask, but they don't want to ask it. And
also, I'm absolutely desperate most of the time. Like, I'm having a hot flush right now while I'm talking, and I'm sweating, I'm shiny, I'm conscious of it, and I want to just do this because I'm actually boiling. And that happens all the time in my whole day. I'm essentially a menopausal lady, and I still don't feel like I can say, sorry, I'm just really hot, because I'm basically,
because you don't fit into people's stereotypical view of what a menopausal woman would look like, because you're meant to be considered the older.
And it's embarrassing, isn't it? And I don't want to be embarrassed by it. I want to be like, this is a condition.
If I
didn't have a leg and I was having pain in the leg, I'd say, gosh, my leg.
Take my leg off or something like that. People wouldn't.
But I literally feel like I'm now really shiny on this video. I am shiny.
You look absolutely fine.
You get makeup in.
It's a nightmare.
It is so difficult, and I think one of the things is that unless people have walked a mile in our shoes, they really don't know what it's like. They've got no idea most of the time about the emotional impact that this all has on us. Because if they did, they wouldn't say those well-intended, however very insensitive comments about, why don't you just adopt, or my kids are a nightmare, you can have, please take them off my hands. But they just don't understand what it's like. And I think it becomes, for the people who do feel strong enough to be able to talk about the realities of all of this, I think they need to, because otherwise people aren't going to know. And we can all criticize people for being insensitive, but unless somebody has actually told them what it's like, how can they be expected to know? They're not mind readers.
And I think if that insensitivity disappeared, it wouldn't highlight why that becomes a problem, if you know what I mean. Sometimes if someone says just adopt, or these kids are a nightmare, you can it then gives you the opportunity to question it and bring it up in sort of wider society and say, well, this is how I feel about that. I mean, nobody can go around censoring other people, but when people say it, it gives you the opportunity to perhaps answer.
If they want to hear it.
Yeah.
That's right.
I still feel like it makes people uncomfortable, to be honest.
It does make people feel uncomfortable, and you can, I quite often see some of the comments on blogs, etc. Or there's been an article written on the HuffPost or something, and people have come back and said something, and it's a case of, no, you actually haven't really read what the person said about this. Comments about the fact that, well, if you decided not to adopt, you can't really have wanted a child enough. And it's a case of, no, that is unacceptable.
But the people, sometimes the people who are expected to attack that don't have the energy anymore, or the strength to go, it's somebody else who I've got to now have an argument with about a difficult situation that I really don't want to talk to because they're stubborn and uninformed. And I think you become tired of that, and there'll be a lot of people who say, I just can't do it anymore, can't be bothered, I'm not going to change them, which is a shame.
It is a great shame, and I don't want to use the word battles because I don't think it should be battles. However, you get to the stage of choosing the battles you're going to fight very carefully, don't you?
Yeah.
Because you get a sense that they're not going to change their mind, so why waste the effort? Which is a great shame.
I'm making the assumption now that the IVF route has now finished for you.
Well, I mean, it has.
So
we haven't made any big decision.
Essentially, it finished. Well, the IVF for us was finished in August last year, and we started the series on Radio 4, and we went through the options, and we spoke about it. We went in the studio, we were grilled a bit, but then we chatted about it, and we had all the options on the table. And by the end of that, when it sort of last episode was February maybe, we've relaxed, we've had some time, we've gone on holiday, and we're just looking at all that information, and again, looking at it, deciding what we can do, and scrutinising ourselves and see what we would be most happy with. It's always hard to say, well, we're not really going to be totally happy with any of it, but maybe that's the position we're in now. And once we've made a decision and moved forward, we could then be, totally happy with it. But it's long conversations into the night still, I think.
But the thing is, it will never be the perfect situation. Now cannot exist.
That's right.
So
that's the hard bit.
So whatever you're looking at is a compromise to whatever degree it happens to be.
That's right. And that's the hardest part for me, because I just am a perfectionist by nature. I'm never happy with anything, and it's something I want to work on personally, because if you can't be happy in life, irrelevant to external factors, then you won't be happy. You have to be happy within, right? And it's something that I'm really, really working on through counselling, through various other means, reading, etc. And that for me was one of the hardest blows, really, because I was lucky enough to meet my Prince Charming. I was expecting my happy ending.
Yes, because
I've written you an article. I've written you an article to tell you exactly that, in the next edition of your magazine.
I was digging about it.
I was literally, I was just on the road to my perfect life.
I think you have to, we have to, and other couples going through it, have to find a new perfection. that
Yes.
might have flaws, might have differences, but you assume then that everything you do is perfection. You
Yes.
don't know what's going to happen. And we dream that, you know, we can get married, have a child, everything's going to be fine. You don't know that, and you've been in this situation, you know, yourself, and you don't know what's going to happen along the way. But you lose. It's the death of a dream. It's the death of that romantic, perfect dream, and you then have to perhaps position yourself to find a new one. And we don't want to throw all our eggs into one basket, because again, that then might be the death of another dream.
Yeah, that's it.
I think it's made us quite cautious.
Yeah, people say, you know, egg donation is a really good way for you to be a mum. You would be carrying the baby, and you are. It's all true, by the way. It's very, very true. But there's no definite guarantee that I'm going to get pregnant from that. I'm really cautious now to get excited about anything, because at the end of the day, we haven't got past first base with this.
Yes.
We don't know if once the egg does fertilise and it is in my body, and I say I get pregnant, we don't know if I can carry it. I know it's a negative thing to say, but we don't know if I can carry. We don't know if my body will reject it. We don't know if the problem might be Johnny's sperm that is stopped moving, and therefore the egg doesn't get any further. You don't know this stuff, because literally we haven't produced enough eggs to work out yet.
Yeah.
And so,
cautiously optimistic in some respects from what we choose, but we've learned a lot about ourselves and what we can expect.
Yeah, it's tempered slightly. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can say to you is that, you know, we've got to the stage now where we are definitely moving forward with what we want to do, and we're happy with that. There will always be a child-shaped hole in our hearts. However, the edges of that hole are no longer as raw as they used to be. You know, it's all been softened slightly by our new sense of purpose. And this isn't the first time we've felt that we've been here. You know, this is about iteration 4 or 5 of our plan B, and they all had potential. They just didn't quite materialise. They didn't quite develop the way we thought they would. So I suppose we were self-aware and sensible enough to go, okay, this isn't quite working. So how do we need to change it? So we'll tweak it slightly. You know, and eventually we've come up with the one which is definitely the right one for us. So
at the moment.
Go on to new things. It's like plan B revision 3.
Yes.
you just have to work with it, don't you? I mean, I'm sure people that find themselves in worse positions with, as you say, like losing partners by death. I mean, or whatever. Like you don't expect it's going to happen, and then it happens, and then you have to work with that. And you know, I guess it's what life is like. You've got to take every rough with the smooth and just adjust. And hopefully we'll get there.
I did know that my wife was going to die before I married her, but that's another story.
And that's something
a different wife than me.
Yes.
Yes. No, not me. And Sophie, you were talking about taking the rough with the smooth. You know, one of the things that I always tell people is that, you know, each time you go through a difficult patch and you come out the other side of it, you need to sort of hold on to the knowledge that you did come out the other side, because that will make you a little tiny bit stronger the next time it happens. Because you know historically that you did survive, and it does eventually get easier. And also, depending on what the struggle was, what the wobble was, it may be that you decided to try some different form of alternative therapy or counselling, and you've got some more tools and techniques, if you like, in your portfolio, in your survival kit. So when you have a wobble, rather than sort of not knowing what to do for several days or weeks or months, you actually go, okay, well, the last time something happened, I used X and it worked. Let's see if X will work this time. So I think over a period of time, you do gradually get stronger, which is something to be hopeful about. Yeah,
I agree. I do agree with that.
Yeah.
And I also think the relationship between the two of you, like the two of us, is so important. And we talk a lot, not just because we have to work across from each other, but we talk a lot, about normal things. And we've always had the shared vision of where we think we want to be.
What this process does teach a couple is to talk.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Just you can't
get through it.
Imagine getting through it if you don't. And it's definitely taught me to talk, not just to you, but to other people, and that's very important. I think men are often don't open up and won't talk about their feelings. Andrew, but it's that sort of you won't express them. So people say you don't, you're fine with it. But actually, sometimes it's really good to open up and talk, because we've found that when we're talking, you can either agree totally and it's all fine within us, or we don't and it's really not fine. But until you've gone and sort of spoken to other people, you're in a bit of an echo chamber, and we're either totally agreeing or totally disagreeing. And you need to just talk about it with someone else, because it might be someone else who helps you look at it a different way, feel about things in a different way. And I can't ever imagine that we wouldn't talk about things, because we always have, and that's essentially how we've got
always been.
And the foundation of your relationship, which is good, because this puts a huge amount of strain on relationships.
Yeah, it really does. It does.
Anyway, it's been wonderful talking to you.
It's been so nice.
This is the time.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
It has been. And listen, massive luck with the summit, and huge luck with the magazine as ever, because we really support both and all of what you do. And thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Thanks, guys. See you later.